My wife said, beg or leave, in front of 30 people. I left. She called before I hit the highway. Welcome back everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something has happened that everyone present will remember. Not the gradual, natural quiet of a conversation finding its end, but the sudden, collective quiet of 30 people simultaneously understanding that they are witnessing something that will be discussed in whispered phone calls for weeks, that this gathering, which had begun as Elena's mother's 65th birthday party in the backyard of the Hargrove family home in Stone Mountain, had become something else entirely, something that no one had RSVP'd for. Marcus Thompson stood in the center of that quiet. He was holding a glass of sweet tea he'd been carrying for the past 20 minutes without drinking, because the conversation had started before he'd had the chance, and the conversation had moved quickly from the mild, ambient friction of an outdoor family gathering to the specific, focused sharpness of Elena at full performance, with an audience. He'd said something about leaving early, a work call in the morning, a project that needed attention before the week started, the ordinary logistics of a man who worked hard and managed his schedule carefully. He'd said it to Elena, quietly, near the drink table, not as an announcement but as a private coordination. Elena had made it an announcement. Leave early, she'd repeated, and the volume had been deliberate, pitched to carry to the clusters of family members and friends arranged around the Hargroves' backyard in the June evening. You want to leave my mother's birthday party early. Again. The again had done its work. Several heads had turned. I have a 7 o'clock call, Marcus said, keeping his voice at the level he'd used. Private, direct. You always have something, Elena said. A call, a meeting, a project. Something that's always more important than being present. Than being here. Than being the kind of husband a woman actually needs. He'd kept his face still. He was good at keeping his face still. Had been practicing it for 3 years of marriage. Had developed it to the specific, refined stillness of someone who understands that reactions are currency and has decided to save them. We can talk about this at home, he said. No, Elena said, and the word landed with the finality of something decided in advance, and Marcus understood then that this was not a spontaneous escalation but a planned one, that the volume and the audience and the specific language she was using had been organized before tonight, that he was in the middle of something that had been designed. We'll talk about it here. Because I'm tired of private conversations that go nowhere. I'm tired of you walking away from things, Marcus. I'm tired of you never being enough. 30 people were now attending to this conversation with the complete, focused attention that people bring to something they understand is significant. Elena, if you want to stay in this marriage, she said, and her voice had climbed to the register of someone who has decided that the volume is the point, that the audience is the point, you will stand here and tell these people, tell my family, tell your family, tell everyone who has watched me try to hold this marriage together while you drift. You will stand here and beg. Beg for another chance. Or you can leave. The quiet arrived. Not gradually. All at once, as though the 30 people present had collectively agreed that breathing itself might constitute commentary and had suspended it. Marcus Thompson looked at his wife. He looked at the 30 people arranged around him in the June evening. Elena's mother, whose birthday this was, sitting in the center of the yard with the specific, pained expression of a woman who loves her daughter and is watching her do something that cannot be undone. Elena's sister Candace, whose face had gone the color of something uncomfortable. His own cousin Raymond, who was looking at the flagstone patio. Elena's friends from work, who had the expression of people who had heard about this marriage and were now watching the hearing. He looked at Elena. She was waiting. She had the posture of a woman who has delivered an ultimatum and believes the delivery has produced the intended leverage, the specific, forward-leaning attention of someone expecting either capitulation or collapse. Marcus set his glass of sweet tea on the table beside him. He set it down carefully, with the attention you give to objects when what you're really managing is your own interior. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair where he'd draped it when they'd arrived 3 hours ago. He said, "Happy birthday, Margaret," to Elena's mother, directly, with the warmth he'd always felt for the woman, which had nothing to do with what her daughter had just done. He walked through the yard to the side gate. He opened it. He closed it behind him. He walked to his car. His phone rang before he'd reached it. He didn't answer. He got in, started the engine, pulled out of the parking space on the residential street, and drove toward the highway. His phone rang again. Elena. He let it ring. The marriage had been 3 years of managing the distance between who Elena was in public and who she was in private, and the complicating factor was that they were the same person. The public Elena and the private Elena were not two different modes but one consistent mode expressed with varying degrees of restraint depending on the audience. She was controlling in the way of someone who had confused control with love for so long the confusion had become her operating system. She managed his schedule, his friendships, his clothing choices, his professional decisions, not through conversation but through the specific, low-grade pressure of a woman who made the cost of independent choice high enough that the easiest path was compliance. He had complied, initially, the way people comply in the early stages of something they believe is love, interpreting the control as attention, the management as care, the monitoring as interest. He'd been wrong about that interpretation, had understood he was wrong about it approximately 8 months in, and had spent the following 28 months deciding what to do with the correct interpretation. What he'd done was prepare. Not as a strategy against Elena. Marcus Thompson was not a man who organized his life around opposition to other people. What he'd done was what he always did when circumstances were not what they should be. He'd looked clearly at what was true, decided what he needed, and built toward it with the patient, methodical attention he brought to everything important. He'd started with Vivian Hayes, who had been his attorney for 6 years and who had, over those 6 years, become the person he consulted when any situation required clarity before action. He'd called her 14 months ago and said, "I need to think about what comes after this." And Vivian, who knew him well enough to understand that after this was not a rash decision but a considered one, had said, "Then let's think about it carefully." They'd spent 14 months thinking carefully. The financial picture had been Vivian's first priority. Marcus had always been the household's primary earner, a fact that Elena described, in social situations, as evidence of her choice to prioritize the marriage over her own career ambitions, and that Marcus experienced as the straightforward reality of a man who had built something professionally through years of disciplined work. What Elena did not know, because she had never asked in any depth, was the full scope of what that work had produced. She knew about the salary. She did not know about the investment portfolio, which Vivian had structured through vehicles that were legally impeccable and practically invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them and knew what to look for. She did not know about the equity positions, or the real estate, or the secondary income streams that Marcus had been building for 7 years with the quiet, patient persistence of a man who understood that the most durable wealth was the kind that accumulated without announcement. He was worth, by the last valuation Vivian had prepared, considerably more than his wife had ever considered possible for a man she'd come to think of as requiring management. He was also, as of 14 months of preparation with Vivian's guidance, positioned to exit the marriage cleanly, the assets protected, the structure documented, the filing ready for the moment Marcus decided the moment had arrived. At a birthday party in Stone Mountain, in front of 30 people, his wife had told him to beg or leave. He'd left. He'd always known it would be something like this. The final thing, whatever it was always going to be something in a crowd. His phone had rung 11 times before he reached the on-ramp. He counted, not because the counting mattered but because his mind did the thing it did under stress, organized, catalogued, produced the accurate number, and 11 was the accurate number. 11 calls in the 8 minutes between the side gate and the highway, which was a frequency that communicated something about the quality of Elena's current experience that Marcus found, when he looked at it honestly, both understandable and unsurprising. She'd expected him to beg. She'd been so certain he would beg that the actual alternative, him leaving, quietly, without drama, with a farewell to her mother that had been warm and sincere, had apparently produced a response she hadn't prepared for. He merged onto I-285 and let call 12 go to voicemail. Then he called Vivian. She did it in public, he said, when Vivian answered. "I heard there was a gathering tonight," Vivian said, which was her way of saying she'd been paying attention to the calendar and knew what was scheduled. "How many people?" 30, Marcus said. "Her mother's birthday. She told me to beg or leave in front of her entire family." A silence, brief and assessing. "And you?" "I left," Marcus said. "She's called 12 times in the last 10 minutes. 13, Vivian said, because she was thorough and she'd heard the phone. "Don't answer yet. Drive for 20 minutes and then call me back. You need to be past the immediate thing before you decide anything." "I've decided," Marcus said. "I know," Vivian said. "Drive for 20 minutes anyway. The deciding is done. The deciding was done 14 months ago." Drive 20 minutes and call me back. He drove 20 minutes. He called her back. File Monday, he said. Everything's ready, she said. Monday morning. He'd booked the hotel before the party. Not because he'd known specifically that tonight would be the night. He hadn't known it would be tonight, but because Vivian had told him, 8 months ago, to have a landing place ready, and Marcus Thompson did what his good advisors told him to do. The hotel was not extravagant. It was clean and properly sized and in a part of the city that was convenient for his office without being the part of the city Elena would expect him to be in. He had one bag in the trunk, packed a week ago, quietly, carried to the car on a Tuesday morning when Elena was at yoga, with the things he'd need for the first 10 days while Vivian arranged the rest. He checked in. He went to the room. He set the bag on the luggage rack. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his phone. 19 missed calls from Elena. One from Candace, Elena's sister, which told him that Elena had begun recruiting support, which was consistent with her pattern. One from Raymond, which said, in text form, "You okay?" That was not okay what she did. "Call me when you can." He called Raymond. "I'm good," Marcus said. "I'm out. I wanted you to know first." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "Out for the night or?" "Out," Marcus said. "Vivian's filing Monday." Another moment. "All right," Raymond said, with the specific, male brevity of someone who understands that the statement has been made and requires neither challenge nor elaboration. "You need anything?" "Not tonight," Marcus said. "But I'll call this week." "I'll pick up," Raymond said. Marcus ordered room service. A simple thing, pasta and a salad, the kind of meal that required no decisions beyond the ordering, and ate it at the desk while reviewing the emails that had accumulated during the party. He answered 2 that required immediate attention, flagged 3 for Monday, and closed the laptop at 10:15. He slept for 8 hours. He hadn't slept 8 hours at once in approximately 4 months. Elena called 3 more times Sunday morning. He answered the third one. "I need you to come home," she said, and the voice was the version he'd heard rarely in 3 years of marriage. The genuine one, the one beneath the management, the specific register of a woman who is afraid rather than performing fear. "I'm not coming home," Marcus said. "Marcus, last night I was upset, I said things that were, I need us to be able to talk about this, I need you to." "Elena," he said, in the tone that stopped things. "I'm not coming home. I'm not begging. Vivian Hayes will file divorce papers Monday morning. Your attorney will receive them through standard channels. I want this to be clean and I want it to be fair and I want it to be done." The silence on the line had the quality of something large being processed. "You planned this," she said. The accusation arriving the way accusations arrived when they were covering for a more uncomfortable recognition. "You were already planning this." "I've been preparing," Marcus said. "Yes. How long?" "Long enough to know it was the right thing," he said. "Elena, you told me to beg in front of your entire family. In front of 30 people. Not in a moment of impulse. You planned it. I watched you plan it while it was happening. The volume, the audience, the phrasing." He paused. "That's who you decided to be in our marriage. And I'm not the man you decided to practice that on anymore. I can change." "I believe that you believe that," Marcus said, and he meant it, because he tried to be accurate about everything, including this. "And I wish you the best in it. Genuinely. But the change, if it happens, will happen in your next chapter, not in this one." "Marcus, please. Vivian Hayes," he said. "Everything goes through Vivian. Please get an attorney before Monday." He ended the call. He poured his hotel room coffee and looked out the window at Atlanta on a Sunday morning. The city going about its business, indifferent and luminous, the way cities always were, and felt the specific, uncomplicated peace of a man who has made a decision from a place of truth and is now living in the truth's aftermath, which was quieter than the alternative and more his own. The divorce proceedings moved with the efficiency that resulted from 14 months of Vivian Hayes preparing them. Elena's attorney, a woman named Forsyth who was good at her job and who had the specific, practiced composure of someone who had reviewed the asset documentation and arrived at conclusions she was professionally obligated to communicate accurately to her client, reached out within 48 hours of the Monday filing. The conversations were handled through the attorneys, which was Marcus's preference and which Vivian enforced with the gentle, consistent firmness she applied to all procedural preferences. The settlement was fair. Marcus had instructed Vivian to be fair, because fairness was who he was regardless of what had happened in a backyard in Stone Mountain in front of 30 people, and because the goal was not punishment but closure. Elena called 4 more times in the week following the filing. He answered once, briefly, to confirm that the process would be handled by the attorneys and that additional direct calls were not necessary. She did not call again after that, which told him that Forsyth had explained what Vivian had already made clear. He moved out of the hotel in the second week into the apartment Vivian had helped him identify. The right size, the right location, east-facing windows, a proper kitchen for a man who cooked, a desk in a room that was only a desk, a space organized entirely around his own preferences without the ongoing negotiation that shared spaces required. He bought a coffee maker that was better than the one they'd had. He arranged the bookshelves the way he'd always wanted them. He cooked dinner and ate it at the table and washed the dishes and went to bed and slept 8 hours most nights. He was not happy in the simple, uncomplicated way that the word suggested. He was something more durable than happy. He was in the correct version of his life, finally, without apology or management or the specific, exhausting performance of being a person that someone else's image of him required. 3 months after the birthday party, Vivian called with the confirmation. The decree was finalized. Everything clean, everything documented, everything exactly as it should be. Marcus thanked her and hung up and sat at his desk in the east-facing apartment and looked at the morning coming through the windows and felt the full, settled weight of something completed. He thought about the backyard. The 30 people. The quiet that had arrived when Elena said beg. The glass of sweet tea he'd set on the table with the careful attention you give to objects when you're managing your interior. He thought about the drive, the on-ramp, the 11 calls before the highway, the specific, particular feeling of a man who is moving through the world under his own power toward a destination he's chosen. He opened his laptop. The Thompson Foundation for Dignified Men had been incorporated in the second month after the party, with the same patient, organized approach Marcus brought to everything he built. Its mission was specific and directly drawn from his own experience: support, resources, and community for men who had been publicly humiliated or systematically controlled in intimate relationships, who had been told, in backyards and living rooms and dinner parties and grocery store parking lots, that the dignity was conditional on compliance. The foundation provided legal resources for men navigating divorce without access to the quality of counsel their situations required, financial literacy education tailored to men who were rebuilding after leaving arrangements that had controlled or limited their financial independence, and a mentorship cohort that connected men in the early, disorienting weeks of starting over with men who had started over and had the evidence of completion to show for it. Marcus taught the first mentorship session himself, to 16 men in a conference room on a Saturday morning, and he told them the story the way he told everything, accurately, without the distortions of either bitterness or performed strength. He told them about the backyard, the 30 people, the specific, exact phrasing, beg or leave. He told them what he'd chosen. He told them, the moment someone demands your dignity as the price of the continued presence, they have already told you what the relationship is. The demand is not the beginning of the conversation. The demand is the end of it. What you choose to do with the information is up to you. He told them, prepare before you need to. Know your financial picture. Know what you own and what you've built. Have a Vivian Hayes. Because the moment when everything changes rarely announces itself in advance, and the people who come through it cleanly are the people who were already ready for it when it arrived. He told them, dignity is not something someone else can give you or take away. It's something you carry or surrender. And the decision about whether to carry it is made not in the public moment but in the private preparation. In the 14 months before the birthday party, in the calls you make when you're in the driveway instead of at the table, in the apartment you furnish the way you want it rather than the way someone else needs it to look. He told them, you are not what was said about you in the worst moment of the worst gathering. You are the decision you made when you were given the choice. 16 men in a conference room on a Saturday morning listened with the complete, honest attention of people who had been waiting for someone to say the thing they were hearing. On a Tuesday morning 4 months after the party, on a Tuesday that looked like all the Tuesdays that working people navigate, the specific, unremarkable texture of a day organized around the work it contains, Marcus Thompson drove to his office through Atlanta in the Accord that had been his since before the marriage and that he'd kept because he liked it. Not because he couldn't afford to replace it but because he'd decided, some time ago, that performing his own circumstances for other people's benefit was not something he was interested in doing. He drove through the city that was his city, that had been his city long before the marriage and that had continued being his city through it and after it, and he felt the thing he'd been building toward through everything, Not arrival, exactly, because arrival suggested a destination and Marcus Thompson understood by now that there was no destination, only the quality of how you moved through the world. But something adjacent to arrival, something that felt like the correct version of motion, forward, chosen, entirely his own. His phone showed a message from Raymond. Foundation event this Saturday. You need a ride. He typed back, I'll drive. See you there. He parked in the lot and walked to the building and took the elevator to his floor and greeted the people he worked with and sat at his desk and opened his laptop and began his day. The day was full of the specific, ordinary work that builds things, calls and decisions and the patient, incremental progress of someone who is building something one day at a time, which is the only way anything worth building gets built. At the end of it, he closed his laptop and turned off the office lights and walked to his car. He drove home through the evening city. He cooked dinner. He ate it at his table. He washed the dishes. He sat at the desk he'd arranged the way he'd wanted and read for an hour, in the quiet of a space that was his, entirely, uncomplicatedly, without negotiation, his, and felt the particular, grounded peace of a man who has finally stopped arranging himself to fit the shape of someone else's expectations and has discovered that his own shape, taken on its own terms, fits exactly right. He went to bed. He slept 8 hours. And in the morning, Marcus Thompson drove into the city and built another day. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If it moved you, like, share, and comment on the lessons you took from it. Let me know where you're watching from, and I'll see you in the next video.